Hello, Professor. Hello, class. Today we will be covering Chapter 14, Privilege Deviance. What is white-collar deviance? Edward Sutherland introduced the concept of white-collar crime in 1939. White-collar crime may be defined approximately as a crime committed by a person of respectability and high social status in the course of their occupation. Consequently, it excludes many crimes of the upper class, such as murder, adultery, and intoxication, since these are not customarily a part of their occupational procedure. There are two characterizations of white-collar crime. 1. It is occupationally related, carried out during the course of the offender's occupation, and occupation involved is white collar as opposed to blue collar. 2. The economic deviant is a relatively respectable, high status person, for example, business managers and executives. How is white collar crime committed? White collars are more likely to commit an offense with skill, sophistication, or most important, with the resources of power, influence, or respectability for avoiding detection, prosecution, or conviction. White-collar crime, also known as white-collar deviance, includes civil and other non-criminal offenses carried out by high-status people as part of their occupation for personal gain or on behalf of their corporation. Corporate deviance. 1. Takes place in corporations, carried out by executives for their companies, benefits, and their own. 2. Can be divided into 4 major types: deviance against employees, deviance against customers, deviance against the government, and deviance against the environment. 1. Deviance against employees. A. Profit maximization. Corporate executives are inclined to ignore health hazards in their plans because elimination of these hazards will eat into corporate profits. B. Corporate structure. Disregarding long-term consequences of employees' health and making choices based on how great a profit they will derive from a certain decision, also known as short-term success, while potentially having to deal with lawsuits in the future. C. Occupational Safety and Health Administration, also known as OSHA. The federal agency established in 1970 to enforce workplace safety. When citations and fines are used by OSHA, companies are allowed to have penalties reduced if deficiencies are committed. Deviance against customers. Most common forms of deviance against customers involve dangerous foods, unsafe products, frauds, deceptive advertising, and antitrust violations. Dangerous foods. Foods can be adulterated, chemical additives used in food products that may cause cancer and other diseases to keep food from spoiling and make it look fresh and appealing for customers. Unsafe products. Profit motive also underlines the manufacturing and selling of unsafe products by automotive, drug, tobacco, and other industries. It also appears frequently in the pharmaceutical industry through the sale of impure, overstrength, out-of-date, and non-sterile products. Falsification of clinical data and withholding data to receive approval from the FDA has become a major issue. Frauds. Fraudulent practices can be found in industries such as banking, insurance, real estate, and securities due to inadequate government control. Suspected frauds are divided into three types. 1. Illegal non-banking activities. Violating banking laws by engaging in unsafe practices, for example, concentrating investment in one high-risk area. 2. Collective embezzlement. Using ownership of a savings and loans institution to steal depositors' money. And 3. Covering up. Falsifying records to make the institution look safe, normal, or financially healthy. There is a lack of state or federal oversight of the industry due to many years of expensive lobbying by banks and other financial firms to remove controls. Deceptive advertising. It is legal to use false or misleading labels and advertisements. For example, Wheaties, Breakfast of Champs. It is illegal to advertise products that can seriously harm a consumer. For such an illegal act, the company is not subject to punishment as a common criminal. The offender is required to sign a document stating an agreement to stop the illegal activity. Bait and switch. The action of advertising goods which are in apparent bargain, with the intention of substituting inferior or more expensive goods. It is illegal if the initial item advertised was never in stock. Antitrust violations. A. Laws that prohibit companies from conspiring to reduce or eliminate competition. Little or no competition causes prices to go up. B. To violate antitrust laws, companies selling the same kind of products usually work together to fix prices that are abnormally high. And C. Corporations sometimes prevent new competition from entering the market. 3 subtle forces of antitrust violations. 1. A history of cooperation amongst corporations. 2. An oligopolistic market dominated by only a few companies, which makes cooperation easy. And 3. Lack of public awareness of antitrust violations.
Deviance against the government. Many instances of corporate deviance against the government involve tax evasion. Tax evasion by corporations is not always illegal. Corporations have a powerful political influence and can legally avoid taxes through tax loopholes made possible by tax laws. One loophole always a corporation to pass all of its profits to individual owners who then pay tax on the significantly lower individual tax rates. Forbes magazine reported how 90% of all corporations in the U.S. are no longer paying corporate taxes because of this loophole. The Washington Post disclosed how American companies have avoided paying $695 billion a year in taxes. Deviance against the environment. It is easier for corporations to dump their wastes on the land and into the air and water rather than disposing of it properly, either because it can be pricey to develop ecologically safer alternatives. Also, corporations are unwilling to accept liability for the health citizens affected by it. People in poor or minority neighborhoods are more likely to suffer than others because of landfills, garbage incinerators, toxic dump sites, and environmentally hazardous plants are located near the homes of the poor and minorities. In the 1980s, Congress passed a law called Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act, also known as Superfund program, promised to clean up uncontrolled or abandoned hazardous waste sites. The Superfund program started off to a bumpy start because the Environmental Protection Agency was easygoing with environmental offenses. Many corporations that polluted the environment were left alone, and the ones who were found guilty were given opportunities to clean up settlements with the EPA. However, towards the late 1980s, the EPA started to closely enforce the Superfund law against guilty corporations causing hazardous wastes. Occupational deviance. Offenses committed by individual white-collar employees for their own gain are usually less costly to the victims. There are many forms of deviant activities in white-collar occupations. Some of the most and costly are employee theft. Theft by employees within their company is highly common and costly. 75% of all employees have admitted stealing from their employer at least once. Employee theft is one of the fastest growing crime in the United States. Most employee thieves are middle class who believe in the American way of life. Embezzlement. Embezzlement is a form of theft from an employer by an employee who has reached a level of trust and who already has legal access to the assets or property they are stealing. Embezzlers range from approximately low-level employees to top executives. Most embezzlers are in management positions. Most often they are white males in their 30s, well-paid, married with 1 or 2 children, and living in a nice neighborhood, although more women are being arrested each year. Financial fraud. The most common form of financial frauds involves the failure to pay income taxes. More than half of all taxpayers have been found to evade taxes to some degree. Middle and upper income people, especially business people and lawyers, are the most common offenders. Why is tax evasion so common? One reason is the popular perception of tax avoidance, which tends to encourage many people to feel that if everybody does it, I'd be a fool if I didn't do it. Another reason is the complication of income tax laws. Less common than tax avoidance is violation of securities laws. Since most violators are professional stockbrokers and stock traders, a popular form of violation by stockbrokers is defrauding customers through sales of worthless securities. There are also securities frauds like sweepstakes schemes, phony internet stocks, and identity theft. In order for them to get someone else's social security or other personal information to get credit cards or loans. Another type of securities violation is insider trading. This involves an insider of a company, such as its owner or one of its executives, buying or stealing its stock on confidential information not yet available to the general public. Most arrests for forgery and fraud, however, are of low-level employees and do not involve very much loss. They are not for crimes related to occupations, and particularly for women tend to be very low-level crimes. Deviance in the professions. There are many forms of professional deviance as there are professions. Here we focus on just 3: medical misconduct, lawyerly lawlessness, and accounting abuse. Medical misconduct involves fee splitting, which involves a doctor receiving money for referring patients. Unnecessary surgery. The reason for these unnecessary operations is due to the desire for maximum profits rather than honest misdiagnosis. Fraudulently claiming payment for services. This involves billing insurance companies and the state and federal Medicaid and Medicare programs for services never done. Double billing them for services done or billing them for expensive physician services when the services have been performed by nurses or other non-physicians. In 2016, the government recovered $3.3 billion in Medicare fraudulent claims. Lawyer lawlessness. Legal lawlessness is widespread and is the practice of overcharging clients. In one survey, more than 60% of lawyers said that they had personal knowledge of overcharging. Accounting abuse. In preparing tax returns for companies and individual accountants, many help their clients in falsifying their income or deductions in order to pay less taxes. Most of the abuse involves fraud or negligence in the course of doing audits. One of the major causes of this accounting abuse is the conflict of interest that is built into the accountant's position as an auditor paid by the company to audit itself. Accountants may insist that they can be totally independent of the company, so as to be able to examine its books objectively, but the fact remains that they are financially dependent on that company. If they overly investigate the company, they will lose the job the next time around. In short, the conflict of interest prevents accountants from doing what they are supposed to do to detect fraud in the company they audit.
Why is white-collar deviance unique? White-collar and corporate deviance is recognized from common crime in various ways. The known aspect of white-collar crime is to maximize profit by the use of power. It has been investigated over the years that many surgeries have been performed that were not needed on patients. For example, 36% of eye surgeries, 31% of gallbladder removals, and 29% of prostate surgeries. The objective for performing these surgeries was that they didn't really need it, but they wanted to maximize profit rather than stating that they misdiagnosed a patient. Another medical misconduct is that they fraudulently charge the clients. This means that the patient is overcharged for something that they had done, or they charge them in their medical bill for something that they didn't get done so they can get that money from the insurance. Another way of doing that would be to falsify indifference. Being ignorant and careless can lead to someone unwilling helping white-collar deviance. Back then, white-collar deviance was not really looked at. Over the years, they have noticed that white-collar deviance, however, has been performed. It has increased and a bit more attention has been drawn to them. White-collar deviance versus violent crime is not equally seen. Violent crime is penalized more heavily than white-collar deviance. This is based due to power and wealth, and to people being less wealthy, they are the ones that get penalized more. We are seeing a pattern in the system leading us to believe that the justice could possibly be colorblind. Basically, that they see that there is white-collar people getting in trouble with the law, and they give them less slack just because they are wealthy and they're known as a white collar. For instance, white collars that have been caught stealing millions of dollars have been penalized less than people that have committed crimes. White collar crimes is not punished as hard because of the individual's power, the wealth, and the influence that they have. It has been shown that criminal justice has been known to target street-level crime rather than respectable self-image. White-collar deviant identify themselves as respectable people and do not think they can be viewed as criminals. They think that they are superior for having served a worthwhile purpose for the economy. There has been a pattern where individuals have been caught cheating on their income tax. Tax offenders tend to victimize themselves rather to criminalize themselves. Tax offenders state in their defense that they did not know how to properly report it on the tax form. So they deny the fact they have committed a crime, which is very common. Deviant opportunity, the benefit of high position and power. Having power and authority can lead to an individual to likely commit deviance in the workplace. Having access to the company's resources and being able to access anything that they want is able to be obtained if you have a high position. Easy access makes it manageable to carry out profitable deviance acts. Having a higher position along with power can be expected for one to steal from the company. Deviant motivation can lead from deviant actions. The more power a corporation has, the more likely they are to commit corporate crime. Social control. Why do white collars commit crime? Simply because they have the access and the ability to do so. White collar crime versus street crime is not punished the same. Therefore, they feel that they can get away with doing white collar crime. A wealthy person versus a low income person, when committing the same crime, their sentences are very different. The wealthier person is cut some slack, whether the low income person is punished for a longer period of time. Basically, wealth equals power, and in contrast to low-income people, they are powerless, so therefore they're the ones who are sentenced longer for the same crime that is being committed. Motivation, fear of loss, and greed for gain. Wall Street observes that there are two emotions that drive the stock market, and those are fear and greed. Selling stocks leads to reducing prices because they are scared to lose money. The feeling of emotion of Fear is high and it can lead the market to crash. Greed leads to investors to buy more stocks, which leads them to more money. The fear of loss in the stock market versus greed and gain. White-collar deviance is associated with losing a house or even going bankrupt. Deviance characteristics that those produce a low profit or high risk of arrest. An example of this could be a credit card fraud. Greed leads to demonstrating how successful one can be from having a strong corporation, and an empire leads to white-collar deviance.
Hey class, it's Jess. So we'll start off with election improprieties, which means that we the masses have the right to choose our leaders, but often has little meaning to those who want to be our leaders, thus resulting in various devious means to win elections. And then the denial of voting right, which means the Electoral College chooses the president, and the writers of the Constitution designed it this way so that political leaders bypass voters and select a president. Sometimes politicians will use dirty tricks, including spreading rumors, having audience members heckle or asking embarrassing questions, or using the telephone sleaze, where workers will call voters and ask them loaded questions to make the candidate look bad. Sometimes campaigns will abuse their finances, and they do this by when the candidates receive large sums of money from huge corporations and donors, they expect the politician to return the favor when they're elected. Incumbent legislators running unopposed also receive large sums of money from the rich with the same expectation, giving the rich access to the White House and Congress. Official violence in the United States started in early U.S. history when the government drove Native Americans out of their lands and killed them. Today it's police brutality, killing of civilians, mostly African Americans and Hispanics. The United States commits democide to a smaller extent than other countries. A global perspective on official corruption. Corruption is a common practice around the world. Usually the poorer the country, the higher the corruption. Corruption is so prevalent that it's expected. In places where corruption is a culture norm, people have to grease the public official's palm in order to obtain or retain business. Corruption hurts the poor because they spend more on bribes as a share of their small income, while their access to badly needed public service is curtailed. Corrupt officials take huge sums of money for personal gain, where money is supposed to be used to develop the country. Causes of corruption include poverty, large population, and lack of democracy. Official ways of neutralizing deviance. Government officials cover up their deviant acts, but when they're caught, they automatically attempt to neutralize their deviance and act like they did nothing wrong. This is also called the ritual of the wiggle. Sometimes politicians will deny the obvious. They try to deny that they did anything wrong. And they also will ignore the deviance. If an illegal act is a private one committed by individual officials, they ignore it by turning their phones off, hiding or going on a trip or going away. They'll hide from the press by simply saying no comment. If government is supposed to take action against officials for some law breaking, it resorts to evasive responses by insisting that the facts do not conclusively and absolutely warrant government intervention. And they'll also try to accuse the accuser. In cases of private offenses, the individual officer may threaten or file a libel suit against a journalist. It probably won't work, but they'll still use it as a distraction to accuse the accuser. They might promise to take action. When officials are under public pressure, they promise to take action to deal with it, but behind the scenes, no action is taken. They'll try to justify their deviance. This method of neutralization is a rationalization par excellence. Although they admit their wrongdoing, they promise to deal with it. The guilty official rationalize their deviant acts by realizing that it was necessary for them to commit deviant acts in order to gain. Okay, other methods of neutralization include a claim of normality, everybody's doing it, a claim of relative acceptability, whatever I did, some people out there are doing worse, a claim of entitlement, given all the sacrifices I've made, I deserve some special reward. Okay, and the causes of governmental deviance is the superabundance of ambiguous laws, governmental complexity, and power. Okay, so superabundance of ambiguous laws, so the lack of clear laws where officials are relatively free to rely on their own judgment and own self-interest to interpret the law. This opens up opportunities for officials to engage in deviant activities with impunity. Government complexity and power. Given the intricate, complex of nature of government as a huge organization, it is inevitable that its members cannot have a complete information responsibility regarding what and how they should do their jobs in organization. Lack of information and responsibility leads officials to get involved in deviant activities. This implies that officials are not to blame for committing deviance because, given the lack of information and responsibility, they do not knowingly or intentionally get involved in deviance. Power theory can be used to explain why officials tend to abuse their power. Stronger deviant motivation, greater deviant opportunity, and weaker social control. Due to a high position in government, officials tend to be ambiguous, more likely experience relative deprivation, which would motivate them to employ deviant means to achieve higher goals. And they further encouraged to abuse their power because they join abundant opportunities for doing so and are not subject to stringent social control thanks to their lofty position in society.